If you can replace your wife this easily, then maybe you never loved her at all. The words escaped my mouth before I even realized I had spoken them, and somehow they sounded louder than the music echoing across the yacht. Nobody heard me. Nobody was supposed to. The champagne glasses still clinked. The cameras still flashed. The laughter still drifted through the warm Miami night, as though nothing extraordinary was happening. That was the strange thing about betrayal. It rarely arrived with thunder. Sometimes it wore a tuxedo, smiled for photographers, and toasted the future while your entire life quietly disappeared behind it. What nobody standing on that glittering deck knew was that one unopened envelope hidden inside my purse would change every smile surrounding that celebration before sunrise. They thought tonight belonged to a millionaire. They had no idea it belonged to his pregnant wife. My name is Evelyn Harper. 8 months pregnant. Married for 4 years to Lucas Bennett, one of the youngest self-made millionaires in Florida. If someone had asked me 6 months earlier whether I trusted my husband, I would have answered without hesitation. Completely. Looking back now, trust is almost funny. It never breaks all at once. It disappears one excuse at a time. Lucas always said success demanded sacrifices. Late meetings became overnight business trips. Weekend vacations became investor conferences. Romantic dinners slowly turned into messages that simply read, "Working late. Do not wait for me." Every explanation sounded reasonable because I wanted it to. Love has a remarkable talent for editing reality into something easier to survive. The first crack appeared on a rainy Tuesday afternoon while I organized paperwork for our accountant. Lucas had forgotten his tablet in the study before leaving for another meeting. I only intended to email myself a property tax document. Instead, a notification appeared across the screen before I could close it. "Thank you for tonight. I cannot wait for Saturday. Red looks better when you are beside me." There was no signature. There did not need to be one. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. My reflection looked unfamiliar. Pale, tired, older than 29. I almost convinced myself it belonged to someone else. Then another message arrived. Same sender. Same warmth that had quietly vanished from my own marriage months earlier. The tablet slipped from my hands onto the leather chair. My daughter moved gently beneath my heart, reminding me I was no longer making decisions for only one person. Lucas returned home that evening carrying fresh lilies because he remembered they were my favorite. He kissed my forehead, asked about the baby's appointment, and spent 20 minutes assembling the wooden rocking chair in our nursery. Watching him tighten every bolt with patient concentration made the messages seem impossible. How could one man look so devoted while living another life no one else could see? I almost asked him. Almost. Instead, I smiled through dinner and listened to another story about investors flying in from New York. He never realized I already knew Saturday had nothing to do with business. Over the following weeks, truth arrived in pieces too small to ignore. Hotel charges hidden inside company expenses. A luxury boutique receipt for a red designer gown that certainly was not mine. Photos from charity events where Lucas somehow stood beside the same blonde woman every single time. Never touching. Never crossing an obvious line, just close enough to leave questions that refused to disappear. Then came the invitation. Heavy cream cardstock, gold embossed lettering. A private yacht celebration honoring Lucas Bennett's newest investment partnership. Formal attire required. Spouses welcome. The final sentence made my stomach tighten more than the baby's gentle kick. Spouses welcome. It was almost mocking, almost daring me to attend. I folded the invitation carefully and placed it inside my purse beside another envelope that no one knew existed. One contained an invitation. The other contained the reason I was going to accept it. By the time that yacht left the harbor, only one version of Lucas Bennett's perfect life would still be floating. The invitation remained untouched on my nightstand for 3 days. Every morning I picked it up. Every night I put it back exactly where I had found it. Lucas never noticed. Or perhaps he noticed everything and simply assumed I would continue pretending not to ask difficult questions. That had become our marriage in recent months. Two people performing familiar routines while quietly avoiding the truth standing between them. On Thursday afternoon, I finally opened the second envelope hidden beneath the invitation. Unlike the expensive cream cardstock from the yacht party, this envelope was plain white with no return address. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper and a small flash drive. Across the top of the page, someone had written only 7 words. Do not confront him before Saturday. Let him speak first. I read the sentence 5 times. There was no signature, no explanation, just those words and the flash drive resting in my hand, like something much heavier than plastic. My first instinct was fear. My second was curiosity. I plugged the drive into my laptop after making certain Lucas had already left for another evening meeting. Several folders appeared. Financial statements, corporate travel records, luxury hotel reservations, photographs. Every file carried dates stretching back nearly 11 months. My hands began trembling before I opened the first photograph. Lucas stood outside a waterfront restaurant smiling beside the same blonde woman from the charity events. In another image, they boarded a private helicopter together. In another, they attended a luxury gala where he had told me he was meeting foreign investors by video conference from his hotel room. None of the photographs showed anything inappropriate. They did not have to. The consistency told the story more clearly than any dramatic image ever could. Every business trip, every canceled anniversary dinner, every missed doctor's appointment had quietly become another memory shared with someone else. I closed the laptop and rested both hands across my stomach. My daughter answered with one gentle movement that somehow brought me back to reality. Crying would not change the past. Panic would not protect our future. I needed facts instead of emotions. The following morning, I scheduled another prenatal appointment, even though I had visited my doctor only days earlier. Lucas kissed my forehead before leaving for work and apologized in advance because he might not make it to the appointment. I smiled politely and wished him a productive day. He thanked me for always understanding. Those words lingered in the silent house long after the front door closed. Understanding had become another word for remaining quiet. After the appointment, I did not drive home. Instead, I parked beside a small cafe overlooking the marina where luxury yachts often departed for private events. I ordered tea that quickly grew cold while reviewing every document again. Hidden among dozens of files sat one spreadsheet labeled Guest Experience Budget. At the very bottom appeared a line that immediately caught my attention. Yacht Celebration. Private Announcement. Exclusive Media Access. My heart skipped once. Private Announcement. Until that moment, I had convinced myself the evening was merely another extravagant business celebration. Suddenly, I realized Lucas planned to reveal something in front of investors, journalists, and influential friends. Something important enough to justify exclusive media coverage. My phone vibrated across the table. The caller identification displayed an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. A calm male voice spoke before I could introduce myself. Mrs. Bennett, my name is Graham Sullivan. We have never met, but I believe you already received the information I arranged to have delivered. My heartbeat slowed rather than quickened. Somehow his voice carried none of the urgency I expected. Only certainty. Who are you? I asked quietly. There was a brief pause before he answered. Someone who owes your family a debt, and someone who believes Saturday should end with the truth instead of another carefully rehearsed performance. Graham Sullivan refused to explain anything over the phone. His voice remained calm, almost reassuring, as though he understood exactly how overwhelming the previous 48 hours had become. You deserve answers, he said, but not through a telephone conversation that can be misunderstood. Meet me tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Harbor Point Cafe. Bring no one. If after 10 minutes you believe I have wasted your time, you may leave and never speak to me again. Before I could ask another question, the line disconnected. I stared at the silent phone resting in my hand while waves rolled gently against the marina outside the cafe window. Every instinct told me to ignore the invitation. Every unanswered question pulled me toward it instead. The next morning, Lucas left home before sunrise. He leaned down, kissed my forehead, and apologized because another investor breakfast required his attention. I watched him drive away through the front window until his black luxury sedan disappeared around the corner. Then I gathered my purse, the anonymous envelope, and the flash drive before leaving for Harbor Point. Graham Sullivan looked nothing like the mysterious figure I had imagined. He appeared to be in his early 60s, with neatly combed silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and the quiet confidence of someone who had spent decades solving complicated problems without raising his voice. He stood as I approached the table and greeted me with genuine respect. Mrs. Bennett, thank you for trusting me enough to come. You still have not explained who you are, I replied while remaining standing. Graham nodded. Fair enough. I spent 27 years auditing private investment firms. 5 years ago, I retired. 2 months ago, an old colleague asked me to review a series of transactions connected to Lucas Bennett's newest business partnership. I accepted because something about the numbers did not make sense. He slid a thin folder across the table, but kept one hand resting on top of it. Before you open this, I need to ask you something important. Has your husband ever asked you to sign financial documents without giving you time to read every page? The question arrived so unexpectedly that I answered without thinking. Many times. Property documents, insurance renewals, tax forms. He always explained them first. Graham slowly nodded as though my answer confirmed something he already suspected. Did you trust him? I laughed softly, but there was no happiness behind the sound. Completely. Graham removed his hand from the folder. Inside were copies of documents carrying my signature. I recognized it immediately. Every signature belonged to me. Yet several of the documents looked completely unfamiliar. Company registrations, partnership disclosures, investment authorizations. My signature appeared beside pages I had never knowingly reviewed. Graham explained that the documents themselves were legitimate, but they had often been inserted between ordinary paperwork requiring routine signatures. Nothing illegal on its own, just carefully arranged convenience. Why would someone do that? I asked. Because people rarely question paperwork when it comes from someone they love, Graham answered quietly. I looked down at the pages again. The realization settled slowly rather than all at once. Trust had become the very tool that allowed secrets to remain hidden. Graham reached into his briefcase one final time and removed another cream-colored envelope nearly identical to the one waiting inside my purse. This arrived at my office yesterday morning, he said. There was no return address. Only your name and one handwritten sentence. I carefully unfolded the note. The handwriting was elegant and deliberate. It read, "The truth never needs to interrupt a lie. It only needs to arrive afterward." I looked back at Graham in confusion. Who keeps sending these? He offered a small smile before shaking his head. I wish I knew. But I do know one thing. He paused long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable. Whoever is helping you already knows exactly what Lucas plans to announce aboard that yacht. And they have been preparing a response much longer than either of us realized. When I returned home that afternoon, Lucas was already there. His suit jacket rested neatly across the back of a dining room chair, while his phone buzzed every few minutes with messages he never allowed me to see. He looked up from the kitchen island and smiled exactly the way he had on the day he proposed. Warm, familiar, almost impossible to distrust if I had not already seen the truth hiding behind it. You are home earlier than I expected, he said as he walked over and gently kissed my forehead. How was your appointment? Everything looks healthy, I answered truthfully. She is growing exactly the way she should. Lucas smiled and placed one hand against my stomach. Our daughter responded with a small movement that made him laugh. For a brief moment, I saw the man I had fallen in love with, the one who used to spend Sunday mornings making pancakes while dancing badly in our kitchen. Then his phone vibrated again. He glanced at the screen for less than a second before turning it face down on the counter. It was such a small gesture, but once you know someone is hiding something, every tiny movement begins telling its own story. During dinner, he spoke enthusiastically about the yacht celebration. He described it as an important networking event that could attract investors from New York, Dallas, and Los Angeles. He explained how months of preparation had gone into making everything perfect. You should stay home and rest, he said casually while cutting into his meal. The doctor probably wants you taking it easy this close to the due date. I looked at him quietly for several seconds. The invitation says spouses are welcome. Lucas hesitated for the smallest fraction of a second before recovering his smile. Of course they are. I just do not want you getting tired around so many people. I nodded as though I accepted the explanation. I understand. He visibly relaxed. That single moment told me more than another 100 photographs ever could. He had already decided I would not be there. Later that evening, after Lucas fell asleep, I carried the folders Graham had given me into the nursery. The rocking chair stood beneath the window overlooking our backyard, waiting for a little girl who would soon call this house home. I opened every document again, reading more carefully than before. Several pages listed companies that had quietly acquired waterfront properties over the past 18 months. Another group of documents showed luxury expenses billed to corporate hospitality accounts. None of them proved wrongdoing by themselves, yet together they formed a pattern too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. Then I noticed something I had completely overlooked. One page contained a guest confirmation list for Saturday's event. Investors, board members, financial journalists, television crews, influential entrepreneurs. Near the bottom appeared one name highlighted in bold: Victoria Langford. Even I recognized it immediately. She was one of the most respected venture capital leaders in the country, known for personally choosing which entrepreneurs received opportunities worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Public appearances were rare. Private yacht parties were even rarer. Why would someone of her stature attend Lucas's celebration? Before I could think further, another document slipped from the folder onto the floor. It was a printed email chain discussing seating arrangements. One sentence had been highlighted with a yellow marker. Ensure Mrs. Bennett's place card remains on the head table regardless of attendance. I stared at the line until my breathing slowed. Regardless of attendance. Someone had insisted my seat remain exactly where it belonged, even if everyone expected it to stay empty. My phone vibrated softly beside the rocking chair. Another unfamiliar number. This time the message contained only one sentence. We're whatever makes you feel strongest. Everything else has already been arranged. I looked out through the nursery window into the quiet darkness surrounding our home. Somewhere beyond that silence, people I had never met were quietly preparing for Saturday. The only question left was whether they were protecting me or preparing me for a truth even larger than the one I already believed I understood. Saturday arrived with the kind of flawless weather that luxury magazines love to photograph. The sky above Miami was clear, the ocean reflected endless shades of blue, and the city seemed determined to celebrate success. Inside our home, however, silence had settled into every room. Lucas left before 8 in the morning after reminding me once again that I should spend the weekend resting. He smiled warmly, kissed my forehead, and promised we would celebrate together another night. I hate missing time with my girls, he whispered while gently touching my stomach. Everything I am building is for our future. I watched him walk toward the front door without answering. Once the house became quiet again, I carried the cream-colored invitation, Graham's folder, and the anonymous notes onto the dining room table. For nearly an hour I simply sat there, studying every page one final time. The evidence no longer filled me with anger. Instead, it gave me something far more valuable: clarity. I finally understood that the most dangerous lies were not the dramatic ones. They were the comfortable stories repeated every day until they sounded like truth. Shortly before noon, my phone rang again. Graham Sullivan spoke first. "Everything is ready," he said calmly. "I wanted to make certain you were still coming." "I will be there," I answered without hesitation. "Good," he replied. "One more thing. No matter what happens tonight, allow Lucas to finish speaking before you reveal anything. Some truths become stronger when people hear the lie first." After the call ended, I opened my closet. Expensive evening gowns hung beside elegant maternity dresses I had purchased for charity galas Lucas eventually attended alone. My hand paused on a dark navy maternity gown that I had never worn. It was simple, timeless, and quietly elegant. No sparkling stones. No dramatic details. Just confidence without trying to impress anyone. I remembered the anonymous message. "We're whatever makes you feel strongest." I smiled for the first time in weeks. The dress was exactly right. By late afternoon, another message arrived from an unfamiliar number. "A black vehicle will arrive at 6:15. Please be ready." No signature. No explanation. Somehow I was no longer surprised. At exactly 6:15, a polished black luxury sedan stopped outside the house. The driver stepped out wearing a tailored dark suit and politely opened the rear passenger door. "Mrs. Bennett," he said respectfully, "I have been asked to bring you to the marina." During the drive, neither of us spoke. Miami's skyline slowly gave way to the glittering waterfront where dozens of luxury yachts rested beneath the evening sun. As we approached the private marina entrance, I noticed television vans, luxury cars, photographers, and security personnel already gathering outside the event. This was far more than a simple business celebration. The entire evening had been designed to attract attention. The driver stopped several hundred feet from the boarding area instead of pulling directly to the entrance. "We are a little early," he explained. "Someone would like a brief word before you board." My heartbeat remained steady as another black sedan quietly arrived beside us. An older woman stepped out first. She appeared to be in her late 60s, wearing an elegant ivory pantsuit with remarkable confidence and warmth. I recognized her immediately from countless business magazines. Victoria Langford, the same influential investor whose name had appeared on the guest list. She approached with a gentle smile rather than the intimidating presence I expected. Without saying a word, she reached for both of my hands and looked directly into my eyes. "Evelyn," she said softly, "I have waited a very long time to meet the woman who quietly changed more lives than she will ever realize." Before I could respond, she glanced toward the magnificent yacht glowing beneath hundreds of golden lights in the distance. Music drifted across the harbor while guests continued arriving in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Victoria smiled again, this time with unmistakable certainty. "Tonight," she said, "they believe they invited the wrong woman. In a few minutes, every person on that yacht will discover they have been waiting for the right one all along." Victoria Langford walked beside me toward the boarding entrance with the calm confidence of someone who had never questioned whether she belonged in any room she entered. Guests arriving at the marina politely stepped aside the moment they recognized her. Some greeted her by name. Others simply nodded with unmistakable respect. I remained half a step behind, still trying to understand why one of the country's most influential investors seemed personally invested in a woman who had spent the past several months quietly watching her marriage collapse. "Mrs. Langford," I began softly, "I think you may have mistaken me for someone else." She smiled without slowing her pace. "No, Evelyn, that mistake was made by other people, not by me." Before I could ask what she meant, we reached the private security checkpoint leading onto the yacht. Uniformed staff immediately welcomed Victoria inside. One attendant politely glanced toward me before checking a digital guest list. His expression changed almost instantly. "Mrs. Evelyn Bennett," he said with professional courtesy, "we have been expecting you. Welcome aboard." Those words lingered in my mind as I stepped onto the polished teak deck. "They have been expecting you." The yacht looked even more extravagant than the invitation had suggested. Crystal chandeliers reflected against polished glass walls. White orchids decorated every dining table. A live jazz quartet performed beneath soft golden lighting, while servers carried silver trays filled with champagne through clusters of investors, celebrities, and executives. Everything had been arranged to celebrate success. At the center of the upper deck stood Lucas, wearing an immaculate black tuxedo, greeting guests with effortless confidence. Beside him stood the same blonde woman from every photograph I had discovered over the past several weeks. She wore an elegant crimson evening gown and rested her hand naturally on his arm as photographers captured image after image. For a brief moment, I simply watched them from across the deck. Not with anger, not even with sadness, only with clarity. The fantasy they had created looked flawless from a distance. Up close, I already knew how many quiet lies had been required to build it. One by one, conversations around us began slowing as guests noticed Victoria's arrival. Then their attention shifted toward me. Curious whispers moved through the crowd like a breeze across still water. Lucas looked toward the entrance almost absent-mindedly at first. The instant our eyes met, every trace of practiced confidence disappeared from his face. His smile froze. His shoulders stiffened. Even from across the deck, I could see him searching for an explanation that did not exist. The woman beside him followed his gaze. Her victorious expression faded just as quickly. Lucas excused himself from the guests surrounding him and walked toward me with controlled determination. "Evelyn," he said quietly, forcing a smile, "I thought we agreed you would stay home and rest." I returned his smile with equal calm. The invitation said spouses were welcome. He hesitated before answering. "I was only thinking about your health." "So was I replied gently. Neither of us raised our voices. We did not need to. The growing silence around us carried every unspoken word. Before Lucas could continue, the event host stepped onto the main stage and welcomed everyone to the evening's celebration. Applause filled the deck as guests gathered near the front. Lucas glanced toward the stage, then back at me. For a moment, he looked almost relieved, believing the interruption had rescued him from an uncomfortable conversation. He had no idea it had only delayed it. Victoria lightly touched my arm. "Remember what Graham told you," she whispered. "Let him finish." I nodded. Lucas returned to the stage beneath the warm glow of the spotlights while the blonde woman confidently took her place beside him. Cameras turned toward the platform. Television crews adjusted their lenses. The music faded into complete silence. Lucas thanked everyone for supporting his remarkable journey, spoke proudly about growth, loyalty, and building a future, then paused with an unmistakable smile spreading across his face. "Tonight," he announced, "I would like to introduce the person who has truly stood beside me as I begin the most exciting chapter of my life." As he slowly extended his hand toward the woman in the crimson gown, I tightened my fingers around the cream-colored envelope inside my purse, knowing that before another 5 minutes had passed, every carefully rehearsed word spoken on that stage would belong to someone else's story. Lucas's hand remained extended toward the woman in the crimson gown while applause rolled across the yacht like a carefully rehearsed performance. She stepped closer with a radiant smile, accepting his gesture as cameras flashed from every direction. "Vanessa Cole," Lucas announced proudly, "has inspired me to see the future differently. Her vision, her support, and her belief in everything we are building together deserve to be recognized tonight." More applause followed. Several guests raised their champagne glasses. A few executives exchanged uncertain glances after noticing me standing quietly near the front beside Victoria Langford, but nobody interrupted. Lucas continued speaking with complete confidence. "Some chapters in life must end so better ones can begin," he said. "Sometimes honesty requires difficult decisions." Those words settled heavily over the silent crowd. I noticed reporters writing quickly in small notebooks while television cameras remained focused entirely on the stage. Lucas took a slow breath before delivering the sentence he had obviously rehearsed many times. "My marriage has existed in name only for quite some time. Evelyn deserves peace, and I deserve the opportunity to move forward honestly." He turned slightly toward Vanessa, who smiled warmly and slipped her hand into his. "Tonight, I choose the future." The deck erupted with scattered applause again, although this time it sounded noticeably weaker. Before Lucas could continue, Victoria calmly stepped forward. She did not raise her voice. She did not ask for permission. Yet the quiet authority surrounding her immediately drew every eye toward her. "Mr. Bennett," she said politely, "before this celebration continues, may I ask one simple question?" Lucas forced a courteous smile. "Of course, Mrs. Langford. Have you completely finished your announcement?" Lucas appeared surprised. "Yes, I believe I have." Victoria nodded gently. "Excellent. Then there will be no interruption. Only context." A wave of curious whispers spread across the guests. The master of ceremonies instinctively stepped aside without anyone asking him to. Victoria turned toward me and extended one welcoming hand. "Evelyn," she said warmly, "would you please join me?" Every conversation stopped. I walked toward the stage slowly, my navy maternity gown moving gently with each step, one hand resting naturally across my daughter beneath my heart. Lucas stared at me with visible disbelief. Vanessa's confident expression gradually disappeared as she watched me approach. I stepped beside Victoria without looking at either of them. Victoria smiled at the audience before speaking again. "Many of you know me as an investor. Tonight, I am here for a much more personal reason." She looked directly at me with unmistakable respect. "Several years ago, when a promising young entrepreneur struggled to convince anyone to believe in his first company, someone quietly recommended that he deserved another opportunity. She never asked for recognition. She never expected repayment. She simply believed potential mattered more than appearances." Lucas frowned slightly as though searching his memory. Victoria continued. "That recommendation reached my desk through one of our early leadership programs. I still have it in my office today." She reached into an elegant leather portfolio resting beside the podium and carefully removed a laminated document. The entrepreneur was Lucas Bennett. The silence became almost overwhelming. Victoria raised the page just enough for the guests nearest the stage to recognize the signature at the bottom. The person who wrote the recommendation was not an executive, an investor, or a board member. She turned slowly toward me. It was Evelyn Harper, years before she became Evelyn Bennett. Lucas stared at the document without speaking. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. I watched realization slowly replace certainty across his face. Victoria placed the recommendation gently into my hands before addressing the audience one final time. The remarkable success everyone came here to celebrate tonight began because one young woman quietly opened a door for someone else without ever expecting applause. I looked toward Lucas for the first time since boarding the yacht. His prepared speech, his carefully planned announcement, and every confident smile that had filled the evening only minutes earlier suddenly seemed very far away. Then I reached into my purse, removed the cream-colored envelope I had carried all week, and placed it calmly on the podium between us, knowing the truth inside had not yet spoken its first word. The cream-colored envelope rested quietly on the polished podium while every pair of eyes aboard the yacht remained fixed upon it. Nobody reached for a champagne glass anymore. Nobody whispered. Even the photographers lowered their cameras for a brief moment, sensing that whatever happened next would matter far more than another glamorous picture. Lucas looked from the envelope to me with an expression I had never seen before. It was not confidence. It was uncertainty. "Evelyn," he said softly, forcing a smile that no longer convinced anyone. "Whatever misunderstanding brought us here, we can discuss it privately." I met his eyes without raising my voice. That was always my first choice. The words lingered between us. "But you chose a public stage." A quiet murmur passed through the audience before fading once again. Victoria Langford gently stepped aside, giving me the space to speak for myself. I placed one hand over my daughter and slowly opened the envelope. Instead of dramatic accusations or emotional speeches, I removed only 3 simple items. The first was the original invitation to the yacht celebration. The second was a photograph of Lucas standing beside Vanessa at a charity gala he had once insisted he never attended. The third was a folded recommendation letter from years earlier. I handed the recommendation back to Lucas first. "Do you recognize it now?" I asked. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the page. His eyes moved across the familiar handwriting before stopping at my signature. The color slowly disappeared from his face. "I never knew," he whispered. "No," I answered gently, "because I never wanted you to believe your success belonged to anyone except yourself." Several investors exchanged thoughtful glances. Victoria remained silent, allowing the truth to unfold naturally. I lifted the photograph next. "This is not why I came tonight," I said calmly. "People make choices. Relationships change. Hearts change. I accepted that long before I stepped onto this yacht." Vanessa lowered her eyes for the first time that evening. There was no anger in my voice, and perhaps that made every word even heavier. "I came because the story being told tonight was incomplete." I unfolded the final document and placed it beside the photograph. It was not a legal notice. It was not a financial record. It was a letter written in Lucas's own handwriting nearly 6 years earlier, before either of us had imagined the life we would eventually build together. He had written it after receiving his first investment offer. In it, he thanked me for believing in him when almost nobody else did. He promised that no amount of success would ever matter more than the family we hoped to create one day. I quietly handed the letter back to him. "I kept every promise I made," I said. "I simply hoped you would remember yours." Lucas read only the first few lines before lowering the page. His carefully prepared remarks, his confident posture, and every polished answer he had rehearsed seemed to disappear all at once. Around us, nobody applauded. Nobody celebrated. The silence itself became the loudest response of the evening. Then Victoria stepped toward the microphone one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said with calm authority, "business has always taught us to evaluate balance sheets before making important decisions. Life asks us to evaluate character with the same discipline." She turned toward Lucas without hostility, only quiet disappointment. "The greatest opportunities are rarely lost because of poor timing. They are usually lost because someone forgets the people who helped create them." Before Lucas could respond, another distinguished gentleman quietly stepped onto the stage from the front row. Gray-haired, impeccably dressed, and immediately recognizable to nearly every executive present, he was Richard Whitmore, founder of Whitmore Strategic Holdings and my father. A wave of astonished whispers swept across the deck as investors who had ignored me only minutes earlier instinctively rose from their seats. Lucas stared at him in complete disbelief. My father smiled warmly at me before placing one reassuring hand on my shoulder. Then he looked directly at Lucas and spoke the sentence that changed the atmosphere aboard the yacht forever. There is one important truth that has not yet been shared tonight, and I believe it is finally time everyone understands exactly who my daughter has always been. Richard Whitmore stood beside me with the quiet confidence that had defined him for decades. He did not need a microphone to command attention, yet when he spoke, every conversation aboard the yacht disappeared into complete silence. Most of you know me through business, he began calmly. Tonight, I would rather speak as a father. His hand remained gently on my shoulder. For years, my daughter asked me to let her build a life without introducing herself through my last name. She wanted to know whether people would value her character before they valued her family's reputation. A wave of surprised whispers spread through the crowd. Executives who had greeted my father countless times suddenly looked back at me with entirely different expressions. Richard continued without raising his voice. When Lucas Bennett first crossed paths with Evelyn, she specifically requested that nobody associated with Whitmore Strategic Holdings influence his opportunities. She believed talent should stand on its own. He looked toward Lucas with genuine disappointment rather than anger. The only exception came when she quietly recommended that a promising young entrepreneur deserved one additional meeting after others had already declined him. She never told him. She never expected recognition. She believed gratitude mattered less than giving someone a fair chance. Lucas lowered his eyes toward the recommendation letter still resting in his hands. His lips parted slightly, but no words followed. Richard slowly turned toward the assembled guests. Many people assume wealth creates character. Experience has taught me the opposite. Success simply reveals the character that was already there. Victoria Langford nodded in silent agreement. Around us, several investors who had been standing beside Lucas only minutes earlier gradually crossed the deck toward my father and me, offering respectful greetings. Nobody had instructed them to move. They simply followed the truth wherever it naturally led. Vanessa quietly stepped away from the stage, disappearing into the crowd without drawing attention. For the first time that evening, nobody watched her leave. Lucas finally looked at me. The confidence that had carried him through every business negotiation was gone, replaced by honest regret. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "I cannot change what I have done." "No," I answered with complete calm. "None of us can change yesterday." He looked down at the handwritten promise he had once given me, then back toward our daughter resting beneath my heart. I forgot who believed in me before success ever did. Tears gathered in his eyes, but I realized something surprising. I no longer needed an apology to heal. Healing had quietly begun the moment I stopped measuring my worth through someone else's choices. I reached into my purse one final time and removed a simple envelope addressed to Lucas. "This belongs to you," I said. Inside are copies of every document I received, along with a letter explaining my decisions moving forward. My attorney already has the originals. I did not come here to destroy your future. I came because our daughter deserves parents who begin telling the truth today, even if it arrives later than it should have. Lucas accepted the envelope with both hands. Around us, the cameras remained unusually still. Somehow, everyone understood that no photograph could capture the lesson unfolding before them. My father offered me his arm. "It is time to go home," he said gently. Together we walked toward the boarding ramp while the first cool breeze of the evening drifted across the harbor. Victoria joined us without speaking. Behind us, Lucas remained standing alone beneath the golden lights that had been arranged to celebrate a perfect future. Instead, they quietly illuminated the cost of forgetting the people who had helped create it. As I stepped onto the dock, I paused only once, resting my hand over my daughter. I did not look back because there was nothing left behind that belonged to my future. The yacht slowly shimmered against the dark water, while the city lights reflected across the bay like countless new beginnings waiting beyond the horizon. Sometimes the greatest inheritance a parent can leave a child is not wealth, influence, or opportunity. It is the example of walking away with dignity when staying would cost your self-respect. Because fortunes can be rebuilt, reputations can recover, but a heart that remembers its own worth will never truly be lost.